This is part 2 of chapter 6, learning. Now we're moving on to module 6.3, and here we're going to be looking at taste aversions as well as how the different learning styles based on Pavlov's work and Skinner's work, how that all comes to be. We'll also be looking at research that helps to talk about learning predispositions, and then we'll also take a look at social learning. So evolution has been able to help us in terms of preparing us with, as well as other animals, to be able to learn through associations more easily than others. So the idea for preparedness is kind of for many practical applications. People learn easily to be able to turn a wheel clockwise or to move something to the right and counterclockwise to move it to the left, like when you're turning the steering wheel of your car. So it kind of controls the work in the opposite way. So people often get confused. There's many engineers who will help design machines that will consult with human factors. And psychologists, we look at how to be able to set up the controls so that people can easily learn to use them. So preparedness is pretty much that concept that's based on evolution that allows us to learn through the association of other tasks and experiences that we've had before. It allows us to make what we learned in the past, those new things that we learned comes to us much easier because of those associations. So based on research, psychologists were able at one time to convince that learning kind of occurs only between events that's happening within seconds of each other. However, we know that generalization fails in certain situations. So consider what might happen if you eat something and then you get sick to your stomach an hour or so later. Despite that long delay between the eating and feeling sick, you'll learn that you need to avoid that particular food that made you sick. So that's an aversion. So if you try to eat it again, you're going to be like, oh no, and find it to be repulsive. So associating a food with illness is something that we call conditioned taste aversion. One of its special features is kind of that it occurs reliably after a single pairing of food with illness, even with a long delay between them. You don't forget that. If you get sick after eating something, you'll learn an aversion regardless of whether the food itself made you sick or that you got sick from something else, such as if you were riding on a roller coaster. You can learn taste aversions to a familiar food, but you acquire much stronger aversions if you had no previous safe experience with that food. So, say for example, my favorite food is fried chicken. I love fried chicken. Yes, I'm going with the stereotype because I do love fried chicken. Say I had a piece of fried chicken. It was great. It was on the money. But then I wound up going to a friend's house and I had a piece of their fried chicken and wound up getting salmonella poisoning. Guess what? Even though I got that, and there might be some aversion, the aversion is going to be more toward my friend not eating their chicken, but I'll eat fried chicken elsewhere. So you see what I'm saying when I'm talking about uh, if the aversion would be stronger if I never had fried chicken at all and I went to my friend's house and I ate the fried chicken there for the first time and got the salmonella poisoning and got sick. Then I would avoid chicken probably altogether. But because I've had it and eaten it before and had no problems and enjoyed it and loved it and just simply had it at my friend's house and got sick, that's not going to stop me from having fried chicken. I'm going to still have my fried chicken, but not at her house. Okay? So if you eat several foods that's before you become ill, you'll learn aversions mainly to those unfamiliar ones or to those situations such as I explained. And even if you ate familiar foods that's like closer in time to the illness. There's a further specialization is that you associate illness with something that you ate and not really with other type of events. But sometimes it can be the event that made you sick. In the case of talking about the roller coaster, say you ate, a chicken on a stick. I'm on chicken for some reason today. I must be wanting some so bad and can't have it right now. But uh, suppose you went to the fair and you had chicken on a stick. It was great. It was good. You enjoyed it. But then you got sick because you got on a roller coaster and you became nauseated. You threw up. You might blame the chicken on the stick rather than blaming that your stomach got upset because you went right on a roller coaster right after eating. So you'll see that point. Now, let's talk about some learning in birdsong learning. There are some species of birds that have a built-in song, but others they have to learn it. Like the male bird learns most readily during a sensitive period early in his first years of life. And during the sensitive period, the infant bird will only listen. So at that point, it makes no response and it'll receive no reinforcement. And nevertheless, learning do occur. So the following spring, when that bird starts to sing, it's through trial and error process. At first, the bird's song is going to be a mixture of sounds, like just like an infant with babbling. And as time passes, he'll start to eliminate some of those sounds and start reorganize, and he'll become like a composer. Okay, he'll rearrange until he'll match the songs that he heard the summer before. But his only reinforcer at this point is going to be recognizing that he sung the song correctly. So just keep in mind, in terms of talking about a sensitive period, that again, it's a time during which there is going to be some type of learning occurring readily, even though reinforcement has not been enacted to help with the learning process. Now, moving on to social learning. According to the social learning approach, we kind of learn about many behaviors by observation through observing the behaviors of other people. So, like if you want to learn to drive a car, for instance, you start by watching people who are already skilled. And then when you try to drive, you'll receive reinforcement for your driving if you're driving well, and you'll receive punishments if you're driving badly. And if by all means try to make sure if you well, hopefully all of you are learning, but if you know someone who is about to learn how to drive and they ask you to help them, if you find that you're highly emotional, don't be the one to help them, because you'll provide more punishments than reinforcements because of your anxiety. So you want to make sure that you find a calm, cool, collected individual that won't jump at every turn or stop or the brake. But going back to what we were speaking about, it's those observations of others that will facilitate the progress. Social learning is basically a form of operant conditioning, and it's the underlying mechanisms that are so similar. But with social information, it's usually going to be quicker as well as more efficient than trying to learn something from scratch all by yourself. Now, when we're talking about modeling and imitation, we model our behavior after others or we'll imitate others. Okay, so why do we even imitate? Well, other people's behavior often is going to help us by providing us with information. Another reason that imitation is done is that other people's behavior kind of establishes our societal norms, so to speak, or rules of thumb. So let's talk about driving, okay? Uh, you'll drive on the right side of the road here in the United States, But if you're in the UK, then you would learn how to drive on the left side. You also would imitate automatically in particular situations. So if someone yawns, more than likely you're going to yawn right along with them. And if you can refrain from yawning, please let me know, because I can't. If I see someone yawn, just talking about it makes me want to do it. So excuse me. But the sight of seeing someone yawn automatically makes me want to yawn with them. Another good example of it is if you're speaking with someone with an accent. Now, I had a very bad habit of, I had back in New York, I had a lot of friends who came from Jamaica, and they had a really thick, rich Jamaican accent. And as I talk with them, or we're carrying on conversations, lo and behold, I start speaking just like them. I start giving it with the roll, and I start talking with tree instead of three, and they would laugh because it would be natural, and I just start imitating their accents because that's what I'm hearing and trying to connect in our conversation and discussion. I would pick up this Jamaican accent, and they realized and knew that by no means I was trying to mimic them or offend them in any way, but it was just something that I would naturally do. This is what happens through that modeling and imitation. Sometimes it comes naturally and automatically, whether you even realize it's happening or not. Now, we tend to imitate those behaviors that'll lead to a reinforcement for other people. We're going to be less consistent in avoiding, behaviors that are, going to be unsuccessful for others. We try to learn vicariously. So when we're talking about vicarious reinforcement and punishment, understand it's that response that's going to be observed. The reinforcement is observed, and the punishment, as if it happened to you, you will go through others. Vicarious learning is caring about how others see and others do. Okay? Whether you imitate a behavior, it really depends on whether you believe that you're capable of duplicating it. And you might consider your strengths as well as your weaknesses. You'll compare yourself to the successful person. You may estimate your chance of success. This is what we're talking about in terms of self-efficacy. Being able to believe that you're able to perform particular tasks successfully, that you don't have any qualms about it, no doubts about it, you know you'll be able to do it, therefore you try. An example of this is knowing I love to bake. So therefore I go out and I look at different on the web, and I look at different bakers and their recipes, and I feel my self-efficacy levels are high because I've baked in the past. Therefore, I'll take a recipe of theirs, and I usually change it up and make it the way I like it. Because I'm diabetic, I can't have all that sugar. So I learned to adapt and change it. But it's because of the self-efficacy that I'm able to perform those tasks successfully, uh, because I have to believe that I can do it. And that's coming from social learning. So finally, so finally, if your sense of self-efficacy is going to be strong enough, then you'll try to imitate the behavior of a successful person. But actually succeeding might require prolonged efforts or practice. People are usually going to set a goal for themselves, and they'll monitor their progress toward the goal. There's going to be times when people might reinforce or punish themselves just as if they were training someone else. So, say for example, if I finish this project I'm working on right now, I knit. I do a lot of different crafts, but it's knitting. So, say I finished my sweater that I'm working on. I might say because of that, I'll treat myself to a movie or a new recipe, baking recipe, or do a sculpture. if I don't finish it on time, because I do time myself, I like to try to knit like sweaters or blankets or whatever. I usually try to do it in a month. And if I'm successful, I celebrate. That's my reinforcement. If I'm not successful, then I get a little down on it and I kind of punish myself by thinking downward thoughts. So it's where I might not go, I might clean the house, which is a chore rather than a pleasure. So that can be a form of a punishment. So, in terms of what we've decided to be able to imitate, and once we try to get it, we'll set goals for ourselves to make sure that we're able to do and perform those particular tasks. And that wraps up learning. Uh, there might be questions. I know that with the lecture being on video, the good news is whatever you didn't catch, you can rewind and pick it back up again and listen again. Um, Remember, with classical conditioning, it's through those associations and pairing a neutral stimulus to an unconditioned stimulus that would create a conditioned stimulus that would help to change your behavior or elicit a behavior that will be an unconditioned response and turn it into a conditioned response. When we're talking about operant uh, conditioning, we're speaking about reinforcements and punishments. Reinforcements, again, is going to hopefully increase a behavior, whereas punishment will help to reduce a behavior. Um, and pretty much I'm going to leave it at that. Do make sure you go over everything, and we'll move on to the next. We have 2 chapters left for the semester, so I will get started on the next video lecture that is going to start covering chapter 7, which, if I can remember correctly, it's on memory. All right, thanks a lot.